Why did Thranduil close his borders while the world burned around him? Why did he march his entire army to the gates of Erebor when Smaug attacked, and then just turn around and leave without helping a single dwarf? Why he never cared about anyone outside the borders of his own forest? Why was he such a dick? By the end of this video, you will understand Thranduil completely, and you might not think he is such a dick. To understand Thranduil, you first need to understand where he comes from, because he is not like Galadriel or Elrond, or the great elven lords of the First Age who were born in Valinor and carried its light with them into Middle-earth. Thranduil is a Sindarin elf, but his people, the elves of the Woodland realm, are mostly Sylvan. Wood elves, the ones who never made the great journey west of Valinor, the ones who stayed behind in the forests, closer to the wild things of the world. His father was Orifer, a Sindarin elf of some standing, who led his people eastward, away from the growing power of the Noldor, away from the influence of the Rings of Power, away from Gil-galad's realm on the coast. Orifer wanted independence. He wanted his people to live on their own terms, beholden to no one. That philosophy, we take care of our own, is not something Thranduil invented. He inherited it. It was literally the founding principle of his kingdom. And for a time, it worked. Orifer's people settled in the great forests of Greenwood. They lived quietly. They survived. Then came the Second Age, and everything changed. Sauron rose. The last alliance of elves and men was formed. Gil-galad called upon every free people of Middle-earth to march against Mordor. Orifer answered the call. He had to. Sauron's shadow threatened everything, but he answered it his way. He refused to subordinate his forces to Gil-galad's command. He refused to coordinate with the Noldor generals. He would fight, but he would fight as his own king, leading his own people, answering to no one. At the Battle of Dagorlad, the plains before the Black Gate, Orifer charged too early. Whether it was pride or impatience, or a desperate attempt to prove his people's worth without outside command, we don't know. What we know is the result. Orifer died in that charge. And of the Sylvan elves who marched to war, of Thranduil's people, 2/3 never came home. 2/3. Thranduil did not just lose his father that day. He lost the majority of his people. He watched them die on the fields of Dagorlad, cut down before the siege had even properly begun. And then he spent years, at the siege of Barad-dûr, watching more of them fall, holding what remained of his forces together while the world ground itself to dust around him. When it was finally over, when Sauron was defeated and Isildur cut the ring from his finger, Thranduil led the survivors home. He was now king of a kingdom half empty, a people broken, a forest that was already beginning to darken. The years passed, centuries, millennia. Sauron's spirit did not truly die. His influence seeped back into the world slowly, like poison into groundwater, and it pooled in Greenwood. The forest that had once been called Greenwood the Great began to change. Darkness spread from the south. The trees grew twisted. Shadows moved beneath them. Spiders, monstrous, ancient things, crept in and made their webs between the roots. The elves of the Woodland realm called it Mirkwood, and Thranduil fought to hold it. For 3,000 years he fought, not in great battles, not in legendary wars sung about in history books, but in the grinding daily work of keeping darkness from swallowing his people whole. Patrols, skirmishes, the slow retreat northward as the shadow spread south. He had no allies in this. The other powers of Middle-earth had their own concerns. The Noldor across the mountains, the men of Rohan and Gondor dealing with their own wars, the dwarves of Erebor getting richer behind their mountain gate. Nobody helped Thranduil. Nobody came to Mirkwood and said, "Here, let us hold this line with you." So he closed the borders. He pulled his people inward. He made the Woodland realm a fortress, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Every resource, every warrior, every ounce of strength he had went toward one thing: keeping his people alive. Is that selfishness? Or is that what a king does when no one is coming to save him? And then we get to the part everyone remembers. Thorin, Erebor, the Battle of Five Armies. Here's what actually happened. When Smaug came and destroyed Dale and drove the dwarves from Erebor, Thranduil did show up. He came with his army. He stood at the gates of the Lonely Mountain, and then he turned around and left. In the films, it's framed as cold abandonment. He looked at the fire, decided it wasn't worth it, and walked away. And that reading is fair. But there's more beneath it. Thranduil had just watched a dragon devastate an entire city and an entire people in a single night. He had his own people behind him. He had a kingdom, already weakened, already stretched, that would have no king and no army if he threw them against a dragon and lost. He made the same calculation Orifer never did. He chose survival over glory. Another reason could be the scar. But it is something Tolkien never actually tells us. In Peter Jackson's films, Thranduil reveals the scarred side of his face, a wound from dragonfire, still visible after thousands of years. But it is a film edition. Tolkien never mentions it in any text. So when did it happen? We don't know. Tolkien doesn't say. But if we speculate, and that's all this is, speculation, the most likely candidate is the dragon attacks on the Grey Mountains in the Third Age, around the year 2570. Dragons descended from the north and drove the dwarves of the Grey Mountains completely out of their halls. Thranduil's forest bordered that region. It is not impossible that those attacks reached the edges of his kingdom, that he faced one of those dragons himself, and paid a price for it that no amount of elven healing could fully undo. Again, Tolkien never confirms this, but it would explain everything. So now we have all the information, was it right? That's a harder question. But it wasn't cowardice. It was a man who had already seen what happens when you charge before you're ready. Then, when Smaug is dead, and Erebor is reclaimed, and Thorin refuses to share even a fraction of the wealth, Thranduil does march. He marches for the people of Dale and for the gems. He marches for gems. Yes, gems that were his, white gems of Lasgalen. Those gems were not just treasure to him. Thranduil had a wife, Legolas's mother. Tolkien never gave her a name, never told us much about her at all, only that she was gone. Most interpretations suggest she was killed by orcs, possibly captured and slain during the wars against the shadow of Dol Guldur. Thranduil never speaks of her, not once. But those white gems, it is hard not to wonder if they were hers, or tied to her somehow. If what looked like greed from the outside was actually a widower trying to reclaim the last thing that connected him to someone he lost. Thranduil marches for the people of Dale, who lost everything when Smaug came and destroyed the lake town. For the people who had nothing, no food, no walls to shelter behind. They were refugees in the ruins of their own city. They had been promised aid by a king who then barricaded himself inside a mountain full of gold and refused to part with a single coin for the people who had lost everything because of what his company accomplished. But they received aid from Thranduil, a king who was supposed to be selfish. A king who had spent 3,000 years watching his own people suffer, recognized what suffering looked like. And he wasn't going to walk away from it. Again, who is actually the dick in that situation? So, why was Thranduil the way he was? Because he watched his father die from too much pride and too little caution. Because he carried 2/3 of his people home in memory instead of in body. Because he spent 3,000 years holding a darkening forest together with no help from anyone. Because every time he opened his kingdom to the outside world, it cost him something he could never get back. Thranduil didn't hate the dwarves, or men, or the other peoples of Middle-earth. He was simply done paying for other people's wars with his people's lives. That's not villainy. That's grief. That's exhaustion. That's a king who learned the hardest possible lesson, that no one is coming to save you, so you had better save yourself. Thranduil spent 3,000 years fighting the darkness of Mirkwood completely alone. No allies. no reinforcements. No one came. And yet there were 5 wizards sent to Middle-earth specifically to fight Sauron's shadow. 3 of them could have helped, but 2 had other mission, an impossible mission. Find out what it was in this video.